It's always good to encourage communication with dementia residents. So if, for example, you're with your mother in the dementia unit lounge and you ask her, "Mum, do you need anything?" And she says, "No." And then you go into her room and again you ask the question, "Mum, I'm sure there's something that you must need. Do you need anything?" And she says, "No." And then you do some detective work and you think, "Look, it's a bit cold in here. Look, Mum, would you like a rug for your knees?" And she says, "Yes." And then you say, "Well, would you like a heater?" And she says, "Yes." There we are. That's the start of communication. So you've hit the jackpot with detective work, asking specific questions and getting the yes-no answers. And then from there, you can work on it. Your mother will be encouraged that she's now warm and she's more likely to open up and communicate as a result of that. So that's just one small example of how you can use these yes-no answers to get communication going. Because it's very difficult initially for dementia residents to communicate. They really do lose confidence. I mean, they lose the skill as well. If you haven't communicated for a long time, your vocabulary goes, and there's some confusion there, memory loss is there. And to be able to work around that and have the confidence to speak, especially if there's been stigma and prejudice into the bargain and you've been shut down in the past, you lose the ability to want to communicate. But if there's that trust that builds up in the relationship, that's the big thing. If there's that trust with the person that's asking you questions and who is encouraging you to communicate, and that trust builds up enough that you do trust the person and that you know that they're doing good by you, then you will make that effort to communicate, and slowly but surely it can improve. So anyway, I mean, it's not that the person has to be a great conversationalist. It's just for them to be able to communicate enough with you that you can understand what they need and what they'd like so that they can be comfortable. I mean, for example, everyone likes to be warm. No one likes to be cold. So it's important to garner from them whether they want a warm jersey or a warm rug or warm heater, and not to be too hot either. So it's nice at least to get the temperature in their room that they're comfortable with so that they can relax. Now, in terms of the group and encouraging conversation, at the facility that I worked at, initially the group was very shut down. Everyone was shut down and there was no communication really, except for maybe yes, no, thank you, that's it. And it did take a long time to get the communication going with the initial group. And I've written about that in both books, or no, actually mainly in the first book, The Resident's Voice. It did take a long time to get the communication going in the first group. But with the second group, which I've written about in The Resident's Rise, there was a big change, because after the first year that I'd been working at the unit, there were these two residents that came in and they were equally bright, remarkably bright. Poor memory, fabulous intellect. They could do quizzes, crosswords, communicate well. One of them knew history, the man, the other woman read prolifically. And they just changed the whole dynamics of the group. They came in, the woman, she made it a task to remember all the names of everyone in the group, an impossible feat. She couldn't find her room, but she did know the names of the people in the group. That took a lot of practice, but she achieved that remarkably. But both of them were equally good at crosswords, and they'd challenge each other. Now, from that equation, the rest of the residents, the first group who were a lot slower, began to see these two residents doing crosswords and answering, really complicated questions. And either they could have shut down and thought, oh, this is too much, it's impossible, or rise to the party, so to speak. Well, they did rise up. They did make an effort. They were inspired. They chose to be inspired. I mean, sometimes some of the residents would say, oh, it's too hard. I can't do it anymore. It's difficult. And it is difficult, and it does take effort. because to redirect your thinking away from negative anxiety and mental stress and dementia stress, to redirect it to focus and concentrate does take effort. It takes presence, it takes focus, it takes concentration, and especially in a dementia unit, which is often very noisy and loud with everything that goes on, with medication trolleys and disturbing residents, it's doubly difficult to concentrate. But if there's the group, the team effort, and everyone's making that effort, that is the big inspirational factor. And if others are making the effort to communicate and concentrate and build confidence to do so, then others will make that effort too. Now this, one of the men in the group, well actually the man that could do the crosswords well and was very good at history, his wife was in the unit, and she was a very interesting woman. She was bright in her own way, but she deteriorated more than him, and she was pretty abrupt with him actually. And there was one occasion where one of the women was going around giving magazines to the other woman to read, you know, from the little dementia unit library, which was basically Women's Day magazines and a few books on New Zealand scenery at that stage. And when these magazines were offered to his wife, the man that could do the quizzes capably said, oh no, she won't read them. And the woman that was giving out the magazines said, oh, well, maybe she might like them. And the wife looked up and said, yes, thank you, that would be lovely, I'd love a copy, and took it. Now, that was an example of she wasn't accepting that her husband could give her help, but she was accepting the help from others. She was resistant to him, but not to others. So sometimes we will be inspired by strangers or people that we don't know, rather than people we are close to. So in that case, that man was actually very supportive to the other woman in the unit and encouraging, but his wife wouldn't allow him to encourage her. It was a complicated relationship. Anyway, they both lived their own life in the unit, and she got on well with everyone, albeit very quietly. She read her magazines. He got on with the other women and encouraged and inspired them, and she was all right with that. He'd obviously been very social all his life. He was still very loyal to her, but still, he certainly enabled and encouraged others to communicate, because he would go around every morning saying hello to all the ladies, and they would equally say hello and a pleasant remark back. So it's not just workshops that, you know, where it's important for communicating, but just with general social engagement, like saying good morning is actually a really big thing. Being able to say good morning to someone in the corridor, saying good morning to your good friend at the breakfast table, all helps in garner community spirit. I mean, many of these women in dementia facilities have been living on their own for many years. If their husbands died, they may have been living on their own for 10 years or more and had no one at breakfast to greet them. So to be able to walk along the corridor and go into a nice warm dining room, say good morning to your friend, and then have toast and cornflakes all made for you is actually rather nice. So some elderly women actually enjoy dementia units in comparison to living in cold homes in a lonely situation. So it's so different for everybody in the dementia unit. You know, the spectrum is vast. So that's why it needs to be individualized as to who needs what to be able to help them manage and hopefully go forward in a dementia unit. So I've written these two books, The Resident's Voice and The Resident's Rise, both from a dementia unit, both on Amazon and both on my website. Now, thank you so much for all your engagement in the site and all your viewing and all your effort with viewing all these videos. I know there's so many, and I really appreciate your views and your concentration and consideration and comments. Thank you.